All right, welcome to Module 7, Identifying and Arresting Suspects. This is Learning Outcomes number 1, which is explain how a suspect is developed, and Learning Outcome 7, Questioning Witnesses. In some cases, there's no suspect identified. In other words, if there's an on-view arrest, you see somebody rob a bank, drunk driving, something like there's an on-view arrest, you make the arrest. But a lot of times you'll get there and there's no suspect on scene. No witnesses to point out a suspect for you, so you got to develop your suspect. How do you do that? That also increases the solvability of your case if you can identify a suspect. So how do you do that? Well, these are the methods here: information, evidence, profiling, information from police files. And we talked about the last of those ones in the last module. So this module we're going to focus on information provided by victims and witnesses. Now, witness ID is a very valuable tool for investigators, but it can also lead to false identification. In other words, if the identification is done wrong by the victim or the witness, you can put a good person in jail, which is not something you want to do. It's the number one cause of wrongful conviction is victim or witness ID, and most of that is tied to police misconduct. In other words, the police pressure the victim or the witness into identifying somebody who the police have already decided have done the crime without completing their investigation. There's projects like the Innocence Projects and people like that try to get convictions overturned when people have been wrongfully convicted. Now, when you're questioning the victim or witness, this is Learning Outcome 7, you want to ask specific questions. Now, the basics are pretty obvious: height, weight, build, race, age, stuff like that you want to ask. But you also want to ask the in-depth questions like distinctive marks, tattoos, amputations, birthmarks. This person in the picture here would be pretty easy to identify with his spider web tattoo on his head and all the swastikas and everything. It wouldn't be hard to pick this guy out in the crowd. I'll look for peculiarities, such as the way they talk and the way they stutter like me, the way they twitch, if they have a foreign accent, a distinctive voice, maybe they have a high voice or a low voice. Clothing worn, are they dressed in a business suit? Are they dressed in casual clothes? Gang affiliated stuff like those outlaw motorcycle vests, other gang type clothing. Maybe it's work clothing. Maybe they work at a delivery company and they've got the delivery company's logo on there. So ask those specific questions. If you go in the textbook, there's a really good checklist in there. I'm big on using checklists. I used to carry checklists with me all the time to help me remember things so I wouldn't overlook them. Another way is composite drawings and sketches. So we still use police sketch artists. Those are people with art ability and their ability to interview a victim or a witness and get a good idea of what they saw and then sketch out what the person saw. If you look here in the photo I've got here is a sketch artist picture of a guy, and I can't remember his name. He's been in the news the last week here. He's the real estate mogul that they want for the murder charge. Now, they haven't tied this particular drawing here with this suspect. They haven't tied them together yet, but they could in the near future. They're still working on that case. Another thing they have is kits, and this is pretty much old school. I used to have one of these back in the 80s, and there's a kit that I had that what I would do is it was clear film, and it had like a head, a mustache, a nose, ears, eyes, stuff like that, and you'd layer them together based on the description from your victim or witness. You'd layer them together till you got a pretty good picture of what they were describing, and you'd show it to them and say, yeah, that's the guy, or no, his eyes are a little bit closer together. So you'd find the layer with the eyes closer together, and then you come up with a picture. Modern technology, we have computer generated, of course. I've never used one of those. I've seen them used. I went to NCMEC, which is National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, back in Washington, D.C., or it's actually Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. And I went there, and they had the forensic artists there, and they would use a drawing software to draw missing children, and I'm sure they had the capability of drawing suspects also. What do you do with these sketches? Well, of course, you want to put them on your website. If you have a police station, you want to disseminate them among the public. If the news will take the story, take it to the news. Circulate them around the neighborhood on posters. Somebody's going to recognize this person, or somebody looks pretty close to it, and you can get a lot of leads off circulating these pictures around. Another way is mug shots. Now, in the old days, mug shots, these are booking photos. As you can see in this picture, here's Lindsay Lohan and Charles Manson. Charles Manson was a person who had his quote unquote family, which was a group of followers, murder several people back in the 60s. He's still in prison, still alive in prison. Matter of fact, just got married a couple months ago. Anyway, you take the mug shots, and remember we talked about how suspects a lot of times continue to do the same things over and over again. Well, if you got mug shots of known suspects, you can bring them out and show them to the victim, and they can keep going through the mugshot books. Or nowadays, I'm sure they're on computers. I haven't used them in years, but I'm sure they're on computers. And have them keep going through the pictures until they see someone they recognize, and that could be your suspect. One of the other ways is a photo lineup. I've used these quite often. Main reason I used them for was hit and run. Remember, I did a lot of traffic investigations, so hit and run traffic collisions where you got maybe the owner of a car or a suspect description from the victim or witness, and you're able to get an ID from the DMV from whoever you suspect is your suspect, and you put your suspect in the lineup along with 5 similars and show it to your victim or witness and see if they can identify him. Now, there's a set of protocol to go through that. You have to tell them beforehand. There's a set script you have to read that says that your suspect may or may not be in here. If you see somebody, let me know. If you don't see somebody, there's no pressure to identify. Again, you don't want to do a false identification because you could put the wrong person in jail. They do not have the right to have an attorney during this process. Second way is a field show up. That's where the crime has happened and the suspects left the scene. They fled from the scene or something, and you caught them a short time later. Get a hit and run. Somebody runs down the street. You get a victim or witness description of it. Another officers respond to the scene. They see this person walking down the street, fits the description. They can stop and detain that person. You can bring your victim or witness out to look at the person. They can do an identification right there. It's called a field show up. They do not have the right to have an attorney present. Now, you cannot bring the suspect back to the scene or to the victim or the witness. You can't do that. That's against court cases, and you're going to lose in the case if you do that. And then you have your old police lineup. You got your suspect and 5 similars. Now, clearly this one are not similars. They don't look alike at all. That was kind of a joke lineup I found on the internet. But you want to have five similar looking people. If you ask them a question, ask them the same question over and over again. Not over and over again. You ask them the same question of all people to make sure that each person says the same thing. If they make the same movements. So in other words, if you tell them to turn left, they all have to turn left. Turn right, they all have to turn right. And in this case, they do have the right to have an attorney because they're in custody. So if they have counsel retained, you have to notify their attorney that you're going to be doing a lineup and then call the people. Some final considerations. You still want to try to link this person to the crime with something other than a victim or witness ID if you can. There's always going to be physical evidence. You look at Locart's principle, there's always going to be physical evidence at the scene. Again, you don't want to just base it on the confession or base it on the victim witness alone. If you can tie them, the more evidence you get, the better case you're going to have, the less chance you have of putting somebody innocent in jail. And that's enough for that one. Hopefully you get your suspect, your case is closed, and we go on to the next section.